All right, cool. I think we're live. Just double check on the channel here and just make sure. Oh, we're already getting hellos. So this is awesome. Hey, everybody.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for joining me and Dave on this live stream. I am so excited to have this conversation with you guys today and share this information. This is something that I'm really passionate about. So I'm going to start by giving a little introduction of why I wanted to have this conversation today and then introduce Dave, and then allow him to introduce himself and what he's doing with AVTECC. And then I absolutely want to see your questions. So I've got my screen up over here. So if you see me looking over here, I'm not ignoring you guys. I'm making sure that I see your questions because Dave, just for reference, my channel subscribers are mostly like a big percentage of them are technicians or like really active DIYers or retired technicians. So these are exactly the sort of people that we want to talk to and give this message to. And also, with the DIY sort of person, you get that autonomy, you get that self-reliance, you get that government get out of my life sort of thing, which I think this really pertains to. So all
No
right, you
question.
guys, yeah, exactly. So we got a problem now, but we've also got the solution. Also, want to say that a few of my subscribers have mentioned that they know you personally, and you've been either their teacher or they've gone to your college. So,
Very cool.
really, really, really cool. So first of all, I want to say I met Dave back in 2016, and he was actually my first real Toyota instructor, like long before I ever was sent away to any of the dealership training. So the only things I'd done were the E modules, and I told you that I actually still had my. So in 2016, I went to the World Pack conference and I did not know who Dave was. I was hoping to God he was a good teacher because I signed up for every single one of his classes because they were all Toyota centric. And I think I spent all 3 or 4 days like right front row, center, right in front of you, and like pretty much camped out there all day. And turned out you were a great teacher, and I learned so much from you, and you left a lasting good impression on me. And I recently caught up with you when I took another one of your classes right before I went to go pass my ASE L1, just to freshen up and make sure I was ready to pass the test, which is something we'll talk about a little later. So I was so glad to reconnect with you, and when I heard what you were doing, I was so excited about this. So hey everybody, hey Lon, hey JD's RCs, hey Penelope. So glad you guys are joining us today. So something that I've been talking about a lot in the automotive industry, something that Bogey and I actually have been talking a lot about, is the advancement of modern cars and how there's really no standard for certification in the automotive industry. And I was talking with one of my girlfriends today who does my lashes. Yes, they're fake. Okay, don't trust anything on the internet, you guys. Okay, sorry to disappoint you. And I was asking her, because she had all these certifications on the wall. I was like, girl, how many certifications do you need? And she was telling me all about the TD TDLR. See, I don't even know what it is because it's never in my life, but the Texas Department of Licensure or something is so active in her life and really restricts the things that she can do. And she was explaining to
Yep.
me the things she can do, the things she can't do, and how she's like, well, and let's be real, the government officials, they don't know what my job is. And the things that she can't do are kind of nonsense. It's like, wow, you can't do this, but you can do this. And, she's got all these little special rules. And she's like, well, that's what happens when you get these people making rules for you that don't work in your industry.
Yeah.
And that is a huge fear of mine coming into automotive because we've seen this massive uptick in crazy technology in all of our cars. We've got self-driving cars going now. We've got crazy advanced ADAS systems. We've got cybersecurity threats. We've got all these things coming. And I feel like we've already seen problems happening with EVs, with even hybrids, with self-driving stuff. And I feel like we're only one major catastrophe away from the government sweeping in and saying, we are going to place mandates, certification standards, and and there is some. I would understand it if they were to do that, but I don't want them to, right? Like I'm not really a
Yeah.
political person, but I want the government out of my life. I want the grassroots. I want the people who are in this every single day, like you and I are, to be the ones getting ahead of this, and
Totally agree.
setting the standards for ourselves. And
Yeah.
that's like a huge thing for me. And then not only obviously some people already are agreeing with us. Yeah. Penelope and Daddy are on our side in this. And uh, not only that, but I also love how it's still voluntary. So you're putting the hands, as an automotive community, are putting the power of certification, and verifying that we have these skills back in the hands of the people, but then also proving our worthiness in a hands-on way. Which, like,
Yes.
this is not to throw anyone else under the bus. I love any sort of voluntary certification that we have in the automotive industry. Right? So one of my good friends does auto body. She's got all of her iCar stuff. I just actually got this in the mail. So I've got all of my ASE stuff. But as you guys know from my L1 live stream, the hardest thing about the test was actually taking the test. I'm a hands-on learner. Like sitting for 2.5 hours and filling out bubbles. We all make sort of joke, and you guys know how much I talk about ASE and how important it is for new technicians coming into the industry. I think especially to set yourself apart, to get a pay increase, and for Toyota, it's really important to be able to bump up to the next level. But man, Dave, I've been saying all the time, I wish these guys could just come in the shop and watch me work instead. Like I want to show them what I can do. I don't want to read a book. I'm not
Yeah.
a reader. Like I'm a hands-on learner. I'm a doer, and sitting for 2.5 hours and filling out multiple choice kind of trick questions, ASE asks someone else. I kind of think that while it's very good for the lower level stuff, it's great for brakes. It's great for maybe not even electrical. Well, maybe electrical because it shows you can read a wiring diagram. But like when you get to the advanced level stuff, I want someone that can do it on the car. So anyway, that's a very, very long intro of you
Yeah.
and what you're doing, but I just wanted to share the background with people because I know you guys are going to get this, why I was so excited about what you're doing with AVTECC. So Dave, I'm going to hand it over to you. What the heck is AVTECC? What are you doing? Why is it important? Tell us all.
Awesome. Wow, that's a tough act to follow. So, yeah, so, just reflecting back on having met you, my gosh, 9 years ago, it was a pretty cool experience having you in the front row, and that was before you were on TV. So I can say I knew Faye when, but I had heard, I guess a few months back you were out at Apex, and I was supposed to be out there and wound up having a conflict and not going. But heard you were out there, so I was really, really surprised and pleasantly so to see you in Texas and we did. And as you said, we got to talking a little bit about certification and what we're doing with AvTech. And for those of you on the call that don't know me, I've been in the automotive industry my whole life. I grew up sort of with a wrench in my hand. My grandfather worked for a company that some of you might know named Snap-on Tools, and from the time I was a little bit of a kid to adulthood, I've been in love with cars and technology and everything to do with them. Took a little break, went to school somewhere in the middle of that, and got a degree in music. Totally different aside, but still a passion. Go figure. But yeah, so fast forward, boy, I'm now going to be 45 years old. Since I was 15, I had a job. So 30 years, in shops. And the last 15 years of my career in automotive education, both secondary and post secondary. And most recently was the Dean of Transportation Programs at Suffolk County Community College, which is the largest SUNY school, or I should say the largest community college in the SUNY system. And had the pleasure of having 9 different OEM brands there, including Toyota T10, General Motors, Honda Pact. We were one of the first Tesla start schools. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, yeah. So been super involved with automotive education, and the last 4 years spent as a doctoral student at Old Dominion University, where my research topic is automotive certification. So, when I got into this whole thing, when you talk about writing a dissertation, one of the first things that comes up is like, all right, well, what do you want to write about? And, having really been passionate about the industry, the students coming into the industry, leaving the college, going out, trying to figure out how to build a better pathway for them. and kind of what that looked like and how do we do that, and realizing that professionalized fields, people have a tendency to do better, financially. If you think about doctors, lawyers, attorneys, people in anywhere in the medical field, there is a licensing component, right? So licensing isn't always bad, but some of those formalized licensing programs, they have very stringent requirements. So, for example, the schooling is very measured, right? The certification
Yes.
program, it's kind of like a three-legged stool. So it's the school, the certification, but then a very, very formalized, call it an apprenticeship or call it
Yeah.
a really a fellowship, right, in
Fellowship.
the
Yeah.
medical field. Um,
Right, and then, like, needing to perform, like, let's say you're gonna be, like, a surgeon, there's something like 1,000 surgeries that you have to perform, like, with a mentor there before you're able to get licensed and go into the quote unquote "real world" and have a practice, so
Yeah, and the challenge is, I think, with education, and when I started thinking about a dissertation subject was, you know, how do we build a better model for students? So, for example, students that were leaving our program at Suffolk did pretty well for themselves. They were highly certified, and when I say certified, a lot of those certifications were OEM certifications that had
right.
immediate identifiability, right? Like, so if you walked into a Toyota dealer and you were Toyota certified, it was easy to understand sort of where you fell sort of in the hierarchy, in terms of pay, so those students did better. So I started to think about, is the pathway to a better career in the automotive industry a little bit better in professionalization, and spelling out a better pathway. And, the further along I got down that road was, some of the things that we've been doing for 50 years just are not working anymore. So looking at those things and saying, well, how do we get to the point where people entering the field are prepared? How do we
Yeah.
make sure they have the skills that they need to have? And how do we ultimately measure that? And that's sort of the
Yes.
genesis of AVTECC is looking at the field and saying, all right, if we're preparing students to go out into the field, we need to measure what they're doing before they leave, and we need to be essentially the quality control for the industry at the school level. So when the students leave, they enter the career, the employers are confident in who they're hiring. And you don't have a situation where you've got this sort of watering down of entry level pay because the employer is not understanding what the true skill is until a person's on the job maybe for weeks or months or unfortunately years. And one of the things that's come to light in my research is 40 to 60% attrition in the first 3 years, and that's probably very like lowly certified people, right? Like not a lot of credentials, maybe walked in off the street. My fear is that a lot of those people are also people that went through 2 year, maybe even 4 years of education. And what I mean by 4 years is they
Yes.
took 2 years at a high school and 2 years at a community college, and they're not sticking. And that to me
Right.
is like it's a shame. It's a shame for the students, right? It's frustrating for students, parents, the people that prepare them. It's super frustrating for the industry, right? I saw something recently that's been posted out there a few times about different surveys that are done in the industry, and one of the common themes is employers are frustrated with schools, right? And
Oh,
those
no,
employers,
definitely. And
and
other
it's
technicians, I think, are frustrated at schools too because, I started right at the Toyota dealership and I was in there at the same level. Well, I went to I had an apprenticeship first, and then I was a lubie at a lube shop for a year next. And then like really started my career off at the Toyota dealership. And there were plenty of people that were going to T10. Like I was on the lube rack or the express maintenance rack with several guys that were actually in school, and I had no formal schooling. It wasn't until much later I'm just like, gosh, I do have to take some classes to fill the void, and picked them up at a local community college, automatic transmissions and electrical things I felt like I couldn't learn on the job. But I got in there with pretty much no experience except Lubrac. And, here are these guys that have a 2-year degree or, that went to T10. I'm like, "Are we're on the same level. What did you learn?" And I wanna point
yeah,
out there's some people in the comments too that like, Country here says, "I've been a mechanic all my life, never been certified in anything, or never been
yeah,
certified,
sure.
period." Um, And
you're the large percentage of the population, right? But probably
yeah,
75% of our industry is not certified.
well, exactly. And he may be a better technician than somebody that holds several certs, but might just have the time, and is good at reading a book and just can go in and
Sure.
sit down and take a test, and maybe their employer pays for it, And so, so that's yeah, just
Yeah.
something I wanted to mention. Sorry about that.
No, and that's a great point. But for the vast majority of our field, folks are not certified. So in 1969, when the federal government wanted to mandate licensing, and we had a program created that was voluntary. Um, I mean, we have huge numbers. I mean, the current certification model in our field is like amongst the top five of any field. But 25% is like the number that a lot of fields get in terms of voluntary certification. So then you say, all right, what about the 75%? Right? And to your point earlier, there's a lot of people in the field working on a ton of complex technology, right? Even if they're just on the lube rack, right? So, for example, if those folks that are 75% of them have not gone through a formalized training pathway, how do we know what their level of preparation is coming in? Are they sticking? My gut feeling and anecdotal evidence suggests that they're not. And AVTECC is really sort of the brainchild of mine to say there's got to be a better way, right? So, like to your point, right, 75% of people that don't take certifications, why do they not take them? I think
Right,
a big part of the reason is, and I think it's multi thing. It's multiple things, not necessarily one thing. But I think one of them is intimidation of taking tests. I think it could be, technicians don't go to work and take tests, right? Good friend of mine has, and I think she's on this call here today, says, so for that reason, how do you create a testing model that meets people where they are? And that's where this skills based assessment comes in. And it comes in for a bunch of different reasons, right? You talked about technology. Somebody at GM 10 years ago said there was going to be more technological change in 5 years than there was in the last 50. And that's probably held up to be true, and maybe so, even more so. So, advanced vehicle technology, right, is the first three letters of our acronym, which is
oh yes,
encompassing of multiple things, right? It's EV, it's ADAS, and it's really technological advancement across the entire car, right? So we're not just an organization that's looking to certify people on EV or ADAS. We want to be somewhat all encompassing to account for the technological shift, even in things like maintenance.
right.
So to that point, for those of you that are on here that have never gone through a certification, what would you think of going through a hands-on certification? You might think a little bit differently about that.
Yes, exactly, hands-on, just
Yeah,
hands-on certification versus sitting in one of those crazy testing centers with your little headphones on for 2.5 hours. Yes, that's how long it took me to do the L1.
yeah,
And because if I had a choice between the 2, I know what I would do. Also, Dave, would you please so it's AVTECC, AVTECC. Will you tell us what the acronym is, by the way?
yeah. By the way, if you look up credentialing bodies, most of them these days, right, unless you were established 50 or 75 years ago, have like six or more letters. And partially for the reason for that is you have to spell out what you do, but you also have to find a web domain that's going to be somewhat functional, or at least something that you can say in two syllables. But really, we wanted to capture what we're doing. It's advanced vehicle technology, education, and credentialing coalition. So AVTECC, two
I love
syllables.
it.
And
I love
our
it.
our purpose and mission is really to reimagine the way that we're doing things in automotive education, as an ecosystem, right? From the first time, a kid like me who grew up with grandpa looking at a toolbox and cars, from the first time they go, man, I really want to do this, to the time they leave their career, we want to be a part of that in helping to develop what it is that they're doing, develop really the skills that they're going to need to be successful as they move throughout their careers.
Dave, I'm just gonna point out you've got some fans in the comments. You've got some former students in the comments,
Cool.
and yeah, just you're one of the best in the industry, which I agree
Uh,
as well. So, Lawnmower asks, are CEs required to maintain credentials? CEs.
he's probably talking about continuing education units.
Okay,
So, yeah, great question. Right
that is
now
that is
in
good.
our industry, um, certification programs that are out there. So, like if you're in an OEM, they're going to require you to do new model training, and that's in the form of e-learning. So, in a sense,
Every
that's
month,
maintaining some of your certification. If you're doing a third-party certification like ASE, it's currently not required unless you're an instructor, right? And if you're an instructor, you're required to do 20 hours of continuing education a year, and that could be a wide range of, whether it's a webinar or whatnot. Our viewpoint on continuing education a little bit different. We do plan on having a continuing education requirement for certification maintenance. So, in other words, if you certify and you get an AVTECC certification, one of the ways in which you're going to keep those certifications active is through continual investment in yourself. And we hope that there will be levels to that. So, in other words, uh, hands-on would be worth more quality points than, let's say a 1 hour webinar where someone may or may not have watched it, or is doing it
right?
at lunchtime and is distracted. So those are all things that we're having conversations about right now that will 100% definitely be a major component to what we're doing.
Love that. Thank you so much for the question. And yeah, I also see in the comments that someone just did something very similar into the hands-on type testing for an OEM. And I will say that yes, when you get into the dealership, they will have some of this hands-on training. But what about those technicians out there that own their own shops or that work at independent shops? I was at the Toyota dealership, and then I went to an independent shop, which I'm so grateful that my former boss, who I adore, sent me to WorldPAC to get continuing education. But once you get into an independent, I mean, it's the Wild West.
Yeah.
But you get into a dealership, and you know that depending on the type of car or depending on the type of repair that you need done, the dealership, the OE, will have a standard that they require their technicians to meet in order to do certain warranty work, certain recalls, or ECU reflashes, or certain levels. But that's their own standard. So that's Toyota standard, or
Yep.
that's, I don't know, GM standard, or Ford standards. There's nothing that is across the board, and there's nothing for us that are independent. So yeah, I also just did some recent hands-on certification testing through Toyota and earned a new certification. But unless you're an employee of one of those OEMs, how do you get that opportunity?
Yeah,
And
that's a
do
good
you feel like
question. I
telling
saw.
us what OEM you work
Yeah,
for?
I saw a. Was that Dave Uriash that I saw made that comment?
Oh, I'm not sure. It's a
That's a
little bit farther
familiar name.
back.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, okay.
so David asked in the comments that I saw, how do you do this in the aftermarket? And I think
Yes.
there's a communication issue in the aftermarket because there's so much training out there, and I've lived it. I mean, classes where I've taught that, sometimes they're really well attended. Did a class last weekend, had about 40 people in it, technicians across Long Island. Faye, the class that we did with you down in Texas, I think there were less than 20, right?
Yeah.
So there are always quality training opportunities out there, and that's something we'll work to do as well, is to get the word out about those opportunities as we require continuing education, showing some avenues in which people can do that.
And I love a comment here by Andrew Fisher. He says, independent here, our guys are required to do a minimum of 40 hours of training a year. I love that. I also want to know, though, how do the customers know that? How do the customers know that you're sending your tech? Like, if they were just, mechanic near me, how do they know who is keeping up with their certifications, who's doing their training? Um, is there any way that you promote that to your customers at all, Andrew? And how are you doing your training? Where are you doing your training? Do you do World Pack training? Do you show those certificates on the wall? How do people know? Also
Yeah,
got Benjamin Davis. He was a VAG tech. Oh, is that Volkswagen Audi
yeah,
group? Is that what I'm seeing? For 5 years here in the UK, tested every month for upskilling. A lot of recall. Worked in the diesel department. Couldn't go back to an OEM plus. I don't do anything new classic only. Okay, I don't do anything new classic only. Okay, very cool. Yeah, and there's um, I, I don't know. I feel like that's where the certification is going, is to all of this new stuff. And this is
Yeah.
something that I've experienced personally on my Supra, which is still wrecked because I do not have the certifications to work on it yet. As an OE employee, I
Yep.
have to maintain the certification standards that Toyota holds for me. I don't even think I'm technically allowed to do my own oil changes, to be honest, on my Supra because I don't hold the Supra certification. Don't get mad at me, Toyota. I'm getting it in March, okay? But my wrecked Supra is still sitting there. I got hit by a drunk driver and I brought it into the dealership. I had to have the dealership repair it. It's so weird, right? Because I'm not Supra certified. And ever since that wreck, I don't know what happened with my ADAS, but both both my husband and I were just like, it is scary to drive. And I brought it back for recalibration multiple times, and the car was very much unsafe with any of its advanced driver assistance systems active. As a
Well,
result, I would drive the car without them on, and there was only so many times I could bring it back, and I was thinking to myself, it's like,
who's
who's
gonna fix
doing
it?
this? I mean,
Yeah.
San
Yeah.
Marcos Toyota. Sorry to throw you guys underneath the bus, but like for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
So I'm
Well,
gonna do it now when I get, once I get the certification, I'm gonna do it myself.
there you go.
But that's, this is something that I feel like we've all had experience with a very high level advanced vehicle, maybe needing a little bit of advanced diagnostic help, and maybe having an issue like this and having a recurring problem. Um, let's see, we've got a question. So, an ASE certification isn't for every vehicle, is what SP is asking. ASE certification it's not an OEM certification. It's an aftermarket type of voluntary certification that is sort of like one of the only industry standards that we have. The other one is ICAR, but that's sort of more, I think, in the
Collision.
auto body. So,
Yeah.
yeah, collision. There we go. Thank you. Side of things. And some OEs do take it seriously. Like Toyota will say that, you can either do our in-person classes or you can opt out of them by passing the ASE. I personally do not find them to be one and the same. I have my ASE A4. I still took the suspension and steering, and I got a lot out of the suspension and steering class, which then had the hands-on element that I had to pass in order to get my certification through Toyota. I felt like with just passing the ASE, I don't feel like I was prepared in the same way that doing the hands-on class and getting the hands-on certification gave me. But that was my personal preference. Um,
So
so I don't
Faye,
know.
to
Yes,
your point, if I can chime in on that,
please. Oh, sorry.
you know,
Very chatty.
no, 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 not at all. But you got me thinking because if you think about it, that's kind of the reason why we are doing what we're doing, right? Talk about certification a little bit. What is a certification, right? A third party organization gets together, they come up with a job task analysis. That job task analysis informs what the test is, right? So if you have multiple manufacturers, right, and all those manufacturers have different names for things, different terminology, um, you know, different vehicles, right, different ways of doing things, it's
Yes.
difficult to build that test and it's extraordinarily hard, right? So you have to spend a ton of time and a ton of money because you have to basically come up with a generic vehicle, right? And that generic vehicle has to serve kind of multiple masters. So what's happening now, and you know what, quite a while ago that was okay, right? Because every vehicle had an engine, every vehicle had an automatic transmission. Let's think about 1972. There wasn't much in the way of emissions, right, on a
Oh,
standard engine. So
yes.
slight differences. Fast forward to now, I mean, take a Supra apart, right? That's practically a BMW product, and then go work on another Toyota product. It's night and day.
Totally,
So
totally different. And
yeah,
it's something we were talking about too with the ASE L1, that I was so nervous about, and I was afraid that I was gonna fail because they had a question on DOD, cylinder deactivation system.
yeah,
That's
yep,
I was like, what is that?
yeah,
My little Toyota, and there was something else that was very much like a GM product system that I
yes,
had never heard of. So yeah, for the ASC L1, it's like a generic vehicle. They make up a
yeah,
generic vehicle. But someone's asking, is the ASE for Dodge? So SP says, so ASE Dodge is just for Dodge. I
No,
don't know what that. Okay.
no, ASE is generalized, right? At least areas A1 through A8. There's some specific advanced level tests, L1, L2, L3, and L4. But for the most part, they have to be generalized because they're serving essentially as the credential for the entire industry. But that's where I was going with this, right? So when you
Okay.
think about testing, right? And what are you going to measure with a test, right? Certifications are valuable. I'd certainly agree that certification is valuable. They show value for people that hold them. We've proved that, at least not necessarily. I shouldn't say we've proved that. We've identified that, in research, that at the very least having certifications um, results in almost $9,500 more when you enter the field than if you don't have certifications. That's pretty big. There is a little bit of a fall off after initial hiring from what's out there in the research literature about the value of certifications after initial hiring, and I have a couple of theories on that. But go back to what you can do with a certification, right? Certifications are really good. I think I saw somebody in the comments say at measuring cognitive knowledge, right? They're really good at seeing, like, can you read something and make a determination or solve a problem? So cognitive exams, right? Multiple choice exams are really good at measuring that. What they're not really good at measuring, and this is where I think AvTech comes in, what they're not really good at measuring is technician skill, right? So somebody can take an exam, right? A certification exam of really any type that's computer based and multiple choice. And there's a percentage chance that they could pass it, right? Just by guessing, right?
Yeah.
Or they could do really well because they think through it and they know the content. So, the idea behind standardized testing is you have benchmarking, right? So you have something called validity, right? And the reason that in our country, regardless of just our field, the reason that we have standardized testing is because there's a benchmark, it's a standard, it becomes something that we can relate that information back to. Where I think we run into a problem now in our industry is, okay, you have that. So when you go to work, what does it mean? And I think that's where we've fallen short as an industry. And I think this is where the schools are getting a bad rap because the schools are trying to teach a ridiculous amount of content in a what I would still say is a relatively long amount of time, but they're going ankle deep, right, into something where they should be kind of up to their elbows, if you know what I mean, at least from a skills perspective. And they know a lot about a bunch of things, right? So what does the guy at the shop say? They come in and they're like, "You went to trade school? Like, what are those teachers doing?" And it's not the teacher's fault, right? The teachers are teaching to a system, right? And that system is an accreditation, right? So we have to relook at the way we're preparing tech. I, I happen to look down and read the comments and have to giggle. But so with that being said, we have to relook at the way that we're doing things. It's I think to have validity, we need to have another piece or a complementary piece to the system that's out there that's actually measuring technician skill.
That's
Um, you
that's
know,
exactly it. And it's like I've
yeah,
had some brilliant service advisors, and man, like, so smart, and they get the concepts, and I guarantee they could go in there and pass every single ASE test, and this is not to throw ASE under the bus, this is, like,
no,
standardized testing in general, um, but would I trust them to go out and actually do the job? And I think exactly your point is those are 2 totally different things. Yes, it's a really great way to measure what you know,
yeah.
and your ability to take a test, and, I'm I'm interested in knowing too, like, so what is the next step? Like, what if there's a trade school out there that says, "Wait a second, I wanna bring this program into my school?" What if there's an independent shop that's like, "I wanna learn more about this and get EV certified or ADAS
Sure.
certified," or, what does the model look like?
So it's a great question. And, we're a relatively young organization. So we're in a startup phase right now and probably will be for the bulk of 25. But where we are right now is we're aggressively creating skills-based certifications. We launched our first one earlier this month. We've been piloting since the late fall. And really, all these certifications are, I would consider them micro credentials, right? So when you think about certifications, most certifications, and this is part of the issue with our industry, is where does the certification live in the technician's career path? So, for example, if you take, the entire electrical pathway and then take a test at the end, well, what happens if you didn't do very well in your first electrical class? And how do you really know that? And the answer is you don't. And a lot of times you don't know until the student leaves the program that they didn't have the skills that they need. And unfortunately for the student, they go on to a career that they go, I can't do this. How we see this working is embedding these micro credentials in courses, programs of study, and that can be in a variety of settings. That could be secondary, post secondary, that could be professional training programs, that could be aftermarket training programs, by the way, OEM training programs. Because if you start to think about the problem with testing, if you think about the cognitive test, and to your point, like GM material, right? Never saw that before. It's really, really hard to build a cognitive test for all of this technology. But the skills piece, right? The skills piece that people need in, let's say, electrical, right, is pretty evident and is pretty universal. So we're building this certification program around the skills that people need to be successful, that technicians need to be successful, that students need to be successful, whether it's starting a career or continuing a career. And how that works is those micro credentials will live within these different programs. So our first phase is training educators and technical trainers. So we're piloting this with a multitude of organizations here this spring. Um, some professional training organizations and OEM. Um, so we have a bunch of organizations very, very interested in utilizing this, and for good reason. It gives them a better measurement in terms of the preparation and the skill set of a technician. And to go back, and I'm kind of burying it here a little bit, but like you talked about at the beginning, the advancement of technology. Here's what a multiple choice test can't do. It can't tell you with a great degree of certainty whether somebody can do something safely or not, right? Because it's not measuring that, right? So, in other words, if you get a 65 on a safety test and it's multiple choice, does that mean that 35% of the time you can go and touch 800 volts, right, on an electric
Yeah.
vehicle? Or does that mean you can calibrate like 35% wrong on an ADAS system? And the answer is absolutely not. So what we're after and what we're looking to do is to create a measurement. And you can't bond people, right? We're not guaranteeing that they're competent, but what we're offering is a better test with what we call a higher level of test fidelity. And it's probably a term that you've never heard before, because in testing, if you're in the testing sphere, we talk about reliability and we talk about validity. All right. And fidelity has to do with how true of a measurement is the test that you're utilizing to measure what you want. So,
Right.
for example, right, we would not have like if we're going to train somebody to swim in the Olympics, right, we would not put them in front of a computer and ask them to identify the backstroke, right? It's just, it doesn't make sense, right? So, the truth in terms of
Yeah.
what you're actually measuring, right? And not to say that you wouldn't test them on other things. Maybe there are things that multiple choice test would be fine for,
Oh,
right?
yeah, no, absolutely,
But if you're
absolutely.
trying, yeah, and if you're trying to measure skill, right, you cannot do that. And I know psychometricians will probably try to fight that idea, but if you look at the way that usually cognitive tests are written in a performance environment, they'll usually say something to the lines of, "Our test can measure knowledge of skill." Right? Now,
Yes.
I could know that you have to use a caliper compressor, right? Or a scan tool to do something, but actually hooking it up and doing it, right, is a completely different thing. So that's what we're interested in measuring. We're interested in measuring the fidelity, right? Or with fidelity, the ability of a technician or a student. So our main goal this year in 2025 is to pilot this with as many organizations as we possibly humanly can, and get them set up to be able to deliver this skills-based certification, at scale. So it's going to be a heavy lift. We need all hands on deck. We are a brand new organization. I left my job at Suffolk Community College because I believe in this so much, and I know this is going to be the future of our industry. But we need support. We need help. We need corporate sponsorship. We need individual members. If you visit our website, avtech.org, there's a link on there that says get involved. We need people to serve on committees. We need people to utilize this, validate it, tell us what works and what doesn't. And it's not going to be perfect at the beginning. One of the reasons that a lot of people don't do skills based or performance based testing is it's expensive, right? So
Yes.
it's a lot easier to go, and it's complicated, right? It's a lot easier to go to a third party testing center and pay them, right? But that's become prohibitively costly, and that's a whole nother story.
Oh,
But
no,
Yeah,
totally, but I also wonder if, like, if getting those certifications too, I wonder if eventually that'll help, like, lower your insurance premiums or something like that, like, especially with all the stuff we're seeing with EVs and hybrids. I don't wanna throw any manufacturer under the bus necessarily, but we've seen the devastation that some dealerships have had happen because of, mishandling of batteries and how costly that is. I just don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to get to some comments because
sure.
I just want to. First of all, Andrew Fisher, I think you're the one that I saw that was someone that went to Suffolk, if I believe that,
I think
if
it
I
was
remember
somebody
that
else. I
correctly.
know Andy through WorldPack,
Oh,
CarQuest.
okay,
He's a technical trainer
got
out in
it.
the
All right.
community. So good to see you, Andy.
Thanks for being here. Also, Junk Food Junkie is saying, finally, someone's speaking the truth. And I agree, Junk Food Junkie. It's a hot topic. It's a hot topic. And then also, I like what the Electron John, the drivability guy, has to say. In my opinion, they're good for two things. Certification is good for two things. As a tech, it shows knowledge to an employer. That being said, the practical certification would mean a great deal more to me than a written test would. And I totally agree, Electron John. That's why especially for new techs, I do like, I'm not throwing ASC under the bus. I always recommend for new technicians, especially if you're fresh out of school, or if you're someone that maybe looks like me, or like something like where you have like a little bit of a barrier, or like people like look at you like you're not serious, having the certification and going out of your way to pay for the test, study for the damn thing, go take the test. Like, ugh. If you're willing to do that, it just shows that extra level of dedication. I've been in the industry for 13 years now. I don't have to prove to anybody that I'm serious about the industry. But I am at that level where, like, I feel like I could benefit so much from something like AvTech, because you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. You're not teaching me basic electrical. You're not teaching me basic steering and suspension, right? I'm at the point where like I'm ready for that advanced stuff, and I crave that hands-on. So it seems like that's the type of technician that you're really catering to with AvTech, right? We're not teaching basics. We're catering to the high level technicians that want to get into the super advanced stuff. I saw one more comment that I wanted to get to. Oh gosh, it was a little bit far back, and oh gosh, actually, do you mind addressing this comment about flat rate? I
Sure.
think it's worth talking about. Deadeye DGen, am I the only one that thinks question mark? They're trying to talk about skills training, but no one teaches you about the flat rate before you start working.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think that the flat rate system. Boy, that's a
I
whole
know,
nother topic for another day. But
I know.
to
Yeah,
that
slave to
point,
it myself.
yeah, I think where young technicians get hurt is if they go into a flat rate system before they have the skills that they need. So I think w- our model helps address some of that too, right? So in other words, if inadvertently someone doesn't know that they shouldn't be on flat rate, and they're put on flat rate, whether that's God forbid a dealership or a facility taking advantage of them, without a minimum or something like that. Um, to be able to demonstrably go in and say, "Hey, I have these skills." One of the problems right now, like, so in my dissertation research, like, you look at median salary in the industry, and it's 47, 48,000, somewhere around there. That means then that 350,000 plus technicians make less than $48,000 a year. Where I live, that's not a living
Yeah.
wage, right?
No,
You can't
and
live.
it's like and we have to do advanced level computers, like, we have to be
Yeah.
computer programmers. Like, we
Well,
have to
and
have such high skill level in order to do this advanced stuff, and I agree, we're
yeah.
not compensated fairly.
Yeah, and if you look at it, what happens is there's no mandated educational requirement in the automotive industry, right? So if I come out of, again, God forbid, 4 years of school, I could be making the same entry level wage as somebody that just walked in off the street, right? And that's to me troubling because
Yeah.
you know uh, there was a study that was done a while ago about how valuable an associate's degree is in relation to pay in the automotive industry, and
Oh,
I don't remember the specific source, and I probably shouldn't even mention it without knowing the source, but I remember reading it, and it was so staggering that it kind of made me sick. It was essentially if you had a 2-year degree without any other credential in automotive, you were not getting paid any more than somebody that walked in off the street. And to me,
yes.
we've got to fix that, right? Which means you can't wait until somebody's out of, let's say, high school or community college to give them a professional certification of some sort. And the reason I say that is because, well, let's look at the current system, right? How many students are leaving programs certified, right? OEM programs, I know they are, but if you look at other certifications, third party certification, a very small number are leaving with professional level certification, right? And that's to me, I think, well, you got to ask yourself the question of why, right? We went through 1,200 hours of school and we're not taking these professional certifications exams, and why? And part of it is there's a 2-year requirement, in terms of um, work experience, right? Because we don't really have a formalized measure. Remember, I mentioned the three-legged stool before, the schooling or educational preparation, the credentialing, and the work experience piece that's usually formalized. In our industry, it's all over the place. So 2 years is kind of like the minimum, but 2 years at Jiffy Lube versus 2 years at the Porsche dealership, sorry, Jiffy Lube, it's completely different, right? There's no way that that experience is anywhere near the same. So, in my estimation, by breaking this up into smaller micro credentials within programs like we're doing with AVTECC is going to give folks that are entering the career a better leg up, that if they're entering that flat rate environment, we can at least say confidently, hey, technician so and so did this and this and has demonstrated those skills against which you're hiring. And if that's the case, they're probably worth, you know, not that we would take that role to say what they're worth, but right now, ask somebody what a C Tech, a B Tech, and an A Tech is, and they'll give you three different answers. And if you ask a
Yes.
hundred different people, they'll give you 100 different answers, right? So
Yes.
that's our goal, is to better come up with a framework for professionalization, that when people leave, and if they're even if they're on flat rate, that they can better enter the career with the skills they need to be successful.
Yes, and, so many points to that and so many comments that I want to address as well. And I'm so sorry to like take you on this wild goose chase of topics, but
All good.
something also that I feel like maybe is related is also keeping technicians. I love this username Tech Tips, but it's TEQ.
Cool.
TEQ tips. I love that. Actually, I've seen a bunch of his or her comments. I have 10 graduates from last year already leaving the industry. They graduated as Toyota experts, ASE masters, and that just got me thinking of something we were talking about before the live stream started. Is that even when there are standards, you still have the independent shop owners or franchisees that will set different pay rates. So, like for example, there's a bunch of different Toyota dealerships around me that pay totally different. So if you're a Toyota MDT and you go to the town right next to me, starting wage is $35 a flat rate hour. But if you go to North Austin, starting rate for MDT is $55 a flat rate hour. So even among the OEMs, there's not standard. But sometimes you hear of technicians getting their certifications and then they'll quit one dealership and go to another because while you may be working your way up in a dealership for 5 years, you might come in at a higher pay because you have those certifications. So,
Exactly.
um, to your point of almost like starting out in that job, bringing a lot to the table, you can start with that higher base pay
Yep.
and then build upon it. But then also, like, just to Tech Tip's point, keeping people in the industry. Do
Yeah.
you have any
Well,
comments on that, Dave?
well, I think keeping in the people in the industry is going to be an ongoing challenge for the automotive industry because when I was a dean at Suffolk Community College, as the industry advances, and some technological fields are easier and pay more money, right? It's a natural progression for a lot of people to want to leave. But I mean, the numbers of people leaving and the brain drain is pretty alarming.
Yeah.
There's 100,000 less people in third party automotive certification than there was 11 years ago. 100,000 less, right? That means less people are voluntarily certifying. So why? There's got to be reasons for it. They don't find that those credentials are bumping them up to the pay levels that they want to, and maybe that's any credentials, but it's tough because if you go and you take a test and you're trying to substantiate an increase in pay, you want to try to substantiate the fact that, hey, well, I made this investment in myself, and the automotive industry, by the way, is not the only industry that's going through this. Think
Oh,
about the
of
four-year
course.
degree, right?
Yeah.
There's a whole thing going on at Harvard right now about the skills-based economy and skills-based hiring, where they've dumped literally the four-year degree requirement across a number of industry sectors and said, well, let's come up with a way for employers to figure out what the skill set of individuals are, and let's hire based on that. And I think that's sort of the beauty of what we're doing, right? If a technician comes in and they take one of our certifications, and let's say it's in advanced diagnostics, they're going to have to do it, right? So when they go back to work, they can say, check it out. I had to do this and it required me to do X, Y, and Z. And they're going to have a list of what they had to do to accomplish that.
Right,
So
and
I
do,
think to that point,
physically do.
yeah. And I think to that point, they can continue to increase the quality of their pay by demonstrating what they have. And so somebody asked earlier on, what was my thesis, or what was my dissertation topic? My dissertation topic was in trying to understand the relationship between certification and earnings potential. And while my certification research has not been completed, the early returns will tell you that there is a relationship there, and it's a positive relationship. So, in other words, the more you invest in yourself, the better you're going to do. The challenge with any data that's out there, when people say, well, hey, this is going to earn you this much percentage more, is that there's like what they call self-selection bias, right? So in other words, if somebody took a survey to say, hey, I got this degree, right, and this degree made me that much more money, right? If they self-selected into a survey to tell you that, right, they're probably, I mean, they're the person that's going to take the certification. They're the person that's going to invest in themselves. They're the person that's going to do better, right? So it's hard to take those numbers as fact when you still have, again, 75% of the industry that's probably struggling monetarily. And but I think certification clearly across the board is the way to get there. I think a higher level of fidelity and testing in terms of what we're actually intending to measure through our performance based certification program is going to be a game changer for the industry. So again, I'm bouncing around topics too. So if I missed
No,
that original question,
keeping technicians, and I think there just has to be not only love for the industry, which is hard on a flat rate system, especially when you're working in groups and you're seeing people like, competing for the good tickets and playing favorites and all this drama that happens in the workplace, that can really get you down. And then also when you're
mhm,
not being properly compensated. I saw a comment about in the dealership sometimes it's smart to be stupid because then you get the gravy work, right? And I saw someone else saying it sucks to be, to have just the diagnostic guys because then the other people don't really learn diagnosis. I happen to enjoy the idea of like specializing, getting really good at one thing and finding your niche, and finding your place in your shop or your dealership or your own personal business. But I agree, it's good to be like really well rounded. You have to. There was also a
By the way,
question.
I'm not
Oh,
laughing at
yes.
you. Somebody
Oh.
in the chat said Faye has chickens. I love the farm. It just so I wasn't laughing at you. I'm just giggling at the
Yes.
comments here.
Well, see, well, and they understand that. I hope. Please forgive me, people. It is dark outside right now. I have no way to end this video with chickens. I end all my YouTube videos with chicken footage. So if you stay till the end and watch my little credits or whatever, then you get to see some, just like a little moment from the day in the life of my flock. And most of my subscribers know all of my chickens by their names. So,
Yeah,
so yeah. Sorry, it's dark. All the chickens are in bed right now, people.
yeah,
And it's cold here, so they're all locked away inside. But anyway, I did want to address. I love that people love my chickens. Tech Tips is asking a really good question I just saw as well. Do you think time in the role is going to be part of the certification? So do you need a certain amount of time investment? I know with like ASE, you need 2 years, I
yeah.
believe.
So
So
yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the reasons that time is a requirement is because the time representation on some certifications is trying to justify time on the job, which is equated back to skill,
right,
right? So in a skills-based certification, we can operate a little bit differently because if somebody comes in to take an entry level type skills-based certification, they likely won't need to have time on the job. What they will need to have is quality training. And really, what we're also trying to do as an organization is walk a really fine line between training and certification. And what I mean by that is there's typically firewalls around certifying bodies. And if you read anything about certification, there's certifiers of certifiers, right? So those certifiers of the certifiers come in and say, okay, well, you're trained. Yeah, I know your training organization should be disconnected from the certifying organization. And the reason that they're doing that is they're trying to protect the test, right? Because the test is the thing that differentiates between does somebody know what they're doing and not, right? But to that point, like if somebody got the answers inadvertently, they could pass the test and not have the skill. In a skills test, even if your test got out, guess what? You still have to perform, right?
yes,
So
exactly.
our, when we're creating policies for this program, one of the things that we're very cognizant of is the fact that we want to make sure that the training that people go through before they take the certification has alignment. So when we create our task analysis that's aligned to skill, we're also creating content outlines that plug seamlessly into curriculum. So for training programs, high schools, community colleges, professional education programs, career colleges, it's a seamless thing for them to go, oh, okay, well, here's where we already have alignment. And it's not reinventing the wheel, it's reframing. And what I mean by that is we're not telling people, hey, you should go out and throw out your entire program and start over. What we're telling them
Right.
is, hey, let's figure out what we need to do in terms of your region, right? What do we need to teach? And we're going to give schools and training organizations flexibility to differentiate what they want to offer in different locations
Yes,
based on advisory board input. But it's also impossible and a fool's errand to think that an advisory board is going to be able to tell you what the curriculum should be in an hour, right, or 2 hours every 6 months. It's
exactly.
not going to happen. So we are bringing this panel together or panels together, and they're awesome panels. They're working technicians, right? These are not people that are in offices with jobs with corporations. These are people that are doing it. So they're either technicians,
Yes,
training managers, curriculum developers, right? Educators that have a subject matter expert that are informing that, aligning it to the training. So, like to your point, is there going to be time requirements? Maybe on some of the more advanced certifications, we're not there yet. We also have two big things happening. We just had our board identified for 2025, so some exciting news coming out about that the next week here. Also going to be soon announcing a governing board, and the governing board is actually the body within our organization that will actually be responsible for determining things like, okay, what are the qualifications to take a specific exam? What are the, if you fail it, what are the retests? What are the costs of all these things? So those are all things that are currently in development. And when I say we're in fast forward on development, every single day we are producing content, product, and moving this forward as fast as we can with maintaining one specific thing, and that's making sure that we're building a quality program that essentially any of the organizations that use us can be, reliant upon the fact that if they mirror what we're doing, they're going to build quality programs with really high level outcomes. And so that's the long answer.
Yeah, and one thing that I heard you say that I really loved was also putting it back in the hands of the people, the autonomy that we're gonna have different needs in different places,
Yep.
right? So there's gonna be a much higher need for hybrid certified techs in, say, Austin,
Sure.
whereas in San Antonio, we're gonna need more tundra techs, or people that are trained, as I saw in the comments. A few people are mentioning the tundra engine recall. Someone's saying they pulled a cab to do it. Why? That's a conversation for another time. I haven't done one yet, so
Yeah.
we shall find out soon enough, I suppose.
To your
Um,
point, though, Faye, if I make one more comment just on the school
please,
thing, right now,
yeah,
schools for the most part are one size fits all, right? In terms of accredited schools. So if they're master certified programs, if they're accredited, they're usually 1,200-hour programs. And those 1,200 hours, you have to cover all areas of the car. The problem now is, and I gave a talk at NACAT. I've got my NACAT 50th anniversary, in case there's any NACAT people on here tonight. Big supporter of NACAT and the work that they're doing. That's the North American Council of Automotive Teachers. I gave the keynote there last summer. And one of the topics that we talked about was, okay, well, what do we do with this new content? Right? We can't make programs longer, can we? Right? So the question becomes, if we make the program longer, um, what do we take out? So you have to have that regional flexibility, but it also gets to the point of high school and college differentiating that. A friend of mine that I met through the Association for Career and Technical Education Research, a guy named Larry Engelbrecht, if he's on, hi Larry. Larry is out in San Diego. He's an ETL for ASE, and he's doing some great work around the idea of trying to figure out what's valuable in terms of certifications through his research. But he's also very interested in high school to college. And what he's identified is there's a 48% duplication of material if you take a 2 year high school program and then go to a 2 year college program. So part of what we're trying to do too is clean that up. So where, first day I walked into a high school, 2009, as a teacher, we were teaching manual and automatic transmission. So I looked at the guy and I just walked out of the field. So one of the guys I was working with, this guy named Steve Celeste, who was a mentor to me at the high school. I said to him, I said, Stevie, why are we teaching manual and automatic transmissions to 17-year-olds? And he's like,
yes.
oh, we have to. And I'm like, says
Says
who?
who? Yeah.
Right. And he told me, oh no, well, we're accredited. That's what we have to do. And I remember thinking at that point, I said, Steve, I said, so just riddle me this. These kids have jobs? And he's like, no. I'm like, can they set a car up on a lift and do service? No. Then what the hell are we doing? Right. So that was one of my very real moments, I think, in education. That was an aha moment that happened 16 years ago, but was really the precursor for what we're doing with AVTECC. Let's do stuff that makes sense, right? Let's formalize educational programs from the perspective of that when they leave us, they need the skills to succeed their first week on the job, but they also need the skills that they need to sustain that. And those skills, a lot of times, are not. They need all this content knowledge. We have to teach them to learn how to learn, right?
Right.
It's like this metacognition thing, right? So thinking about how they do things so that when the new systems come out, right? And this is done commonly in STEM fields, engineering, computer science, right? You can't possibly teach all of computer science in a 4 year degree. So what do? They teach you how to learn. They teach you the core principles, the core concepts, the core skills that you need that then you can take and you can specialize as you move on in your career. And that's exactly what we want to do. So we want to shake this whole thing up, dump it out on the table, put it back together from a 21st century perspective that's underpinned by really, really strong educational and industry knowledge. By the way, I was a technician, I was a teacher. Our vice president was a technician, he was a teacher. He also happened to run a program that you probably know of, the Toyota T10 program. When we announce our board, people are going to be really excited about the people that are on our board too. They fit all those categories in terms of teachers, professionals, the pinnacle of the
Yes,
career.
people who
So
have worked in the industry
have
and
done it.
understand it, and not
Yeah.
who have worked in the industry 50 years ago, because things have changed. And one last thing, I know I told you I'd only keep you for an hour. And look at me, we're an hour five. So sorry. I know you've got a family to get back to, but another reason that I like this, I sort of want to come full circle and just remind people who are sort of joining us now rather than joined us at the very beginning is that the part of the reason why I love this is that if we do not come up with a solution from the grassroots ourselves as the people who do this every single day of our lives, who have lived in the flat rate system, who have gotten frustrated with lack of diagnostic time given to the higher level jobs and looked at the people doing the gravy work and just getting all frustrated and then and seeing that there's no standard and are also fearful, just like I am, that there's going to be some incident out there that's going to get the attention of the government, and the government is going to sweep in, who've never worked a day in their lives in the automotive industry, and standardize this for us. This is something that we all need to be able to get on board with in some sense, and take the power back for ourselves. Also, for me as someone, I do not have an automotive degree. I went right into an informal apprenticeship program I did for 2 years. Then I changed oil for free, mind you. Okay, I volunteered. I don't recommend anyone do this, but I couldn't afford tech school because I had I worked for free on the job training, and I was struggling just to pay my rent. So when I started, I just had no ability to do that. So, now going back, I didn't do auto shop in high school, and I don't have an automotive degree. So, how do I then level the playing field for myself? And obviously, I feel like I've done that in my career, but someone else in my situation going into a job, like, I love the idea of this further certification, this hands-on skill testing. Because another thing is like if when you're in tech school, I feel like that's also when you learn how to pass a lot of these written or online now certification tests. And I did not have that opportunity. I didn't learn how the inner workings of a master cylinder worked. I don't know the difference between a primary cup seal and a secondary cup
Yeah.
seal and what happens if the reuptake valve. I learned on the job how to diagnose a bad master cylinder. I can tell you if one is bad or good. I'm not going to take one apart and rebuild one. Maybe you do that 50 years ago. So if I'm not in school learning how to take the test and I'm learning on the job instead, this levels the playing field for me because I can demonstrate how to do a job safely, accurately, and with a whole group of my peers who maybe have gone to school or have degrees, and it puts me on the same level. It gives me the same advantage as everybody else.
Well, to
So
your
I
point,
like that.
yeah, and it's the other thing that I realize and we realize as an organization is that everybody's background is different. I see
Yeah.
some comments in here about folks having no
Oh,
certifications. That doesn't make
yes.
them any less of a technician. In fact, some of them are probably better than people that do have
Yeah,
certifications, right? Am
exactly.
I
Yes,
right,
and I'm
guys?
seeing yeah, no, I'm seeing that
But
people saying that in the comments, someone
yeah,
at tech school and, they're still learning how to tighten fasteners. And so I,
sure.
I feel like we've got, and looking at things from only a paper accreditation standpoint without that hands-on, I feel like we're doing such a disservice to the people
Yeah.
who have learned by trial and error, by the school of hard knocks, by like throwing themselves in there.
Yeah. Well,
And I see a lot
to
of
your
people in the
point,
comments agree.
yeah, and to your point, I know there's all sorts of data out there on, people nervous about taking tests. Like I said before, our technicians, right? I grew up a technician. I grew up working with my grandfather. I didn't have formalized training. I never went to automotive school. I learned, by doing, and then when I started teaching is probably when I learned the most because I had to understand the theoretical end of things.
Yes.
to a certain perspective, more so than I did from a variety of different perspectives. But I guess my point in starting to, to respond to you is there's a home for everyone in the system that we're creating, right? I'm a technician at heart. I'll tell you a story. My grandfather just turned 92. And I was at my mom's house for his birthday a couple weeks ago. The grandfather worked for Snap-on, and we were talking about this very subject. And he goes, "Dave, we when you used to ride around with me as a kid on the Snap-on truck, we would go into shops where technicians were struggling, right? They were struggling to figure out what they didn't know every single day, and what you're doing, he really kind of choked me up. He said, "What you're doing is really, really important because you're helping technicians." So I I made a leap of faith here with this organization to think that this is something that people are going to embrace. I hope that they do, right? And we're not coming. Look, I'm going to have a PhD, right? But I started where everybody is on this call. The only reason I'm going to have a PhD is I thought I would have spent my whole life in education. I was going to need it, right? So much like many of you that invested in yourselves to move on. But here's what I would say is I'm taking the things that I've learned about our field, about where all of you come from, um, and we're taking, the perspective of what we know works in education, what employers want and need, and that's what we're baking into this program. So while we haven't shared a ton of details tonight, there is way more to come. And stick with us, tune in, check out our website, avtech.org, and stay up to date because there's going to be a lot of information coming out in the weeks and months to come about program progress, how to get involved. A few people I saw earlier on asked, how do professional technicians get into this? How do they test? Um, we're working with some very savvy test consultants to come up with creative ways to test. And they're not. And when I say test, it's not what you think. It's not like you'd have to go to this static environment where something is set up. So more to come. Stay tuned, and happy to help answer any other questions too. I think man, I could talk about this all night. So eventually, you guys will probably hang up. But happy to help. Whatever. Happy to help however I can.
Let me just make sure that I've got that correctly.
Yep,
AVTECC.org. Okay,
that's
so
it.
I just put it in the comments. It's also in the caption, very long. You see my little description, my passionate little description that I wrote for this YouTube video. You can find, and I'm actually really excited. I'm trying. I mean, I've got to wait for the date for my Supra certification class. Speaking of certs, because I want to be able to do more than just change the oil on the damn Mark V Supra. But I'm hoping that it doesn't. I'm hoping that it doesn't cross paths with you're doing. Is it a hands-on training demonstration or actually certification
At
at
Vision,
Vision?
yeah, so at Vision, we're doing one of our first certifications. It's called the EV Safe certification. So going back to my earlier point about, getting a 65 on a safety test is probably not a good indication that you're going to be able to work safely. And some of these systems, they're 800 volts, right? Some of these systems, if you leave a cable loose, a high voltage cable, and you don't check that it's properly tightened or you reused fasteners, right? We never do that in the automotive industry.
Nope.
Uh,
um,
so to that point, that test is actually assessing someone's ability to work safely on the vehicle from PPE selection, validation, utilizing the proper equipment, and then ultimately testing someone's ability to kind of walk through what they would need to do to de-energize a vehicle safely.
yeah, and that is something I feel like you have to show hands-on. I'm sorry, like
Yeah,
that. And then
one hundred
imagine if
percent.
you come into a dealership or an independent shop with that certification, and you start getting those jobs. But also, like, that as someone who is a small business owner, if I saw someone come in and prove to me that they did a hands-on, showed that they had those skills, something
Yep,
so important, I don't know, that would make me want to hire them, that would make me want to pay them more. I mean, I love that. So I'm trying so hard. I mean, I'm just waiting to see when the super class is, but I want to take that. I wanna take that, I wanna do that test and just, like,
Yeah,
and experience it so badly, um, and it's something that I'm already certified for through Toyota. I could work on any, hybrid or electric vehicle through Toyota, but could I
yep.
pass the test hands-on? I really wanna see. I wanna
You
see.
you can. You totally can. And it comes down to practicing the right thing. There goes my music background over in the corner here. I had have my trombone, which I've played. My teacher's in the New York Philharmonic. So how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Right, is the old adage: practice, practice, practice. But then there's like the right practice, right? So we used to say, like, in order to be really proficient at something, and there's this a book behind me on the shelf here called The Talent Code. The guy talks about having 10,000 hours of meaningful practice on something, right? And what he meant by meaningful practice was not just like, hey, I'm learning and making mistakes, but like you're focused on getting better. So when you think about that, like when we align training to what we're doing, that training 100% has to be aligned to what it is that we want the technicians or the students to be able to do when they leave, right? And that has to be something that's relevant, right? So in that safety area, yeah, would love to have you come in and take that. We're doing that at multiple national events. The one at Vision is sold out, but I know a guy, and maybe we can sneak you in. And then we're doing this again at the North American Council of Automotive Teachers. We have a multitude of dates that we'll be publishing in the near future about a bunch of different opportunities for certification, but also professional development for teachers. How do you teach to students when you're trying to teach them skills? What's the best way to do that? Right. And yeah, a lot of exciting stuff to come.
Heck yeah. One last question I wanna answer just because it relates.
Sure.
What would be one
Don't
of
mind me. I'm
those.
going to move my phone here a second. I got to plug it
Oh,
in.
you're fine. No, and we should wrap it up. Everyone's been so awesome. What would happen, someone asked, I'm just paraphrasing this, if you didn't tighten the fastener correctly? Toyota calls it a thermal event. Uh,
Yeah. Well,
if you
here's what I
reuse, like,
would
some of
say.
those little nuts. Yeah.
You ever leave a 12-volt battery cable loose and put your hand on it afterwards? Right? How much current is there? Right? You got to figure, I don't know, 60, 80, 100 amps maybe. All right. You got a 120 amp alternator. You're not meeting that all the time. So in a regular passenger car with a 12-volt system with a loose battery cable, right? That thing's going to get pretty hot. So now I have a 400-volt system or I have an 800-volt system,
Yeah.
right? And my cable is slightly loose. Technicians need to know. Somebody asked about Teslas on here, right? It's not as easy as just picking up your multimeter that you've had in the shop for the last 10 or 15 years. You need specialized tools. You need something called a milliohm meter.
Yep.
Um, you need to be able to go in and actually physically take a measurement on things like contactors or wherever you have some of these high voltage connections, to basically make a determination of what the resistance is at a connection, which is going to be, if you think about it, the reason we had heat at that battery cable that was loose because of high resistance, right? Because the battery cable was loose. So if we have a loose high voltage cable, there's a strong possibility that a vehicle could have as Faye said, a thermal event, God forbid. But like to Faye's earlier point, the reason that we started in these safety critical areas, what happens when a senator's house burns down from an electric vehicle and it turns out that somebody worked on it and just didn't know, right? Because we didn't verify that they could do that job. And that's the crux of where we are as AVTECC is trying to make sure that we have a 100% pass rate on a skills based test, especially in safety critical areas, so that we have really a better indication of what people are able to do.
Exactly, and taking a skills-based hands-on test also shows the technician what they need to work on. It's
Exactly.
and because you're not just guessing. And, sorry, one last one because I saw a super chat. Thank you, I'm not human, for the $5. You know what? This is it's worth answering. Any tips for a new flat rate tag for whoops, man, I just let me
Do flat rate tech.
for financial success? Things I can do are oops, oh my gosh, sorry. Um, things I can do are oil changes, alignment, steering and suspension, fluid changes, and brakes. Any tips for new flat rate tech? Yep, for
Yeah.
financial success.
Yeah. Invest in yourself, go out and get some certifications, right? Not all of our certifications are out yet. And again, we're not saying don't go out and take other certifications, right? Those have value too. What we are saying is
Absolutely.
that what we're doing is more complementary, right? It basically gives you the third leg of the stool, right? In terms of with doing the skills base. But yeah, don't don't worry about what certification you take. Make the investment in yourself, because at the end of the day, what all of these certifications are really signaling to employers, and there's all sorts of uh, sociological theories that go along with this, is that you're signaling an investment in yourself. So if you make a investment in yourself, no matter what certification that is, or you go and take a class and get yourself more knowledge, that demonstration to your employer, if they're not recognizing that, go find another one, right?
Yes.
Because that's the reality of the situation. An employer that sees you investing in yourself and getting better at what you do is really going to recognize you for that. So as a young person, keep learning, keep going to school, and don't forget that this career path, and really any career path, you have to make a commitment to lifelong learning. And hopefully, if we got anything through you tonight, it's that.
Absolutely, and, one thing, I'm not sure if I'm Not Human, if you're working with a bunch of other technicians in the shop is, if there's something that you're truly passionate about. I did see that he mentioned transmissions, but unfortunately his shop or her shop doesn't do transmissions. That maybe it might not be the right shop, so find something that you are truly passionate about, but if you show your passion and enthusiasm for the industry, and you're a really hard worker in your shop, I guarantee you that the older guys and gals, the higher up techs are gonna notice, because it's kind of rare to see someone that is so genuinely passionate and enthusiastic, and your hard work will not go unnoticed. And find somebody that you want to take as a mentor as well. And because quite often, if you're a lower level tech and you're on the lube rack, eventually, if your dealership or your shop has like teams or a foreman, or you know there are mentors that have the option to choose you for their team, or to select you, or to move you up, and this varies from shop to shop. But this was what worked for me. Is I was a flat rate lubie, and I was the only tech that would show up early and stay late every single day when there was like only a few cars trickling in. But what I would do is I would walk around to the master techs, ask what they were doing, ask if I could help, and that got me selected a little, picked off the line a little bit faster. Also got me to learn a whole bunch of new skills from people that are doing it. So I would just I just say that would be my recommendation, as well as everything else that Dave said. So anyway, but I've been keeping you guys for almost an hour and a half, and Dave, I'm just so grateful for your time. This was such a
Oh,
great
thank you.
discussion, and I really hope that I can see you in March at Vision. We'll see what happens. I would just so love to be a part of that, and I look forward to seeing what you do with AvTech. Thank you so much for sharing that with me today, and all of us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Faye. And for everybody that's on, I'm a pretty approachable guy. So if you go on the website, you can get a hold of me. I will likely answer your message. And I want you to know, as you leave here tonight, I walked a mile in your shoes. I started in this business in the exact same place where most of you are, in a shop. So I'm passionate about the work that you do, value the work that you do, and you guys keep the world moving, so to speak. So it was my pleasure to be here. And Faye, thank you so much. It's great to spend some time with you, and it's a pleasure meeting you. I can't believe it's 9 years ago, but hopefully we continue this dialogue. And if you got topics in the future, or your supporters have things they come up with, happy to jump back on and continue the conversation on a multitude of topics about all things training, education, certification, and really making a profession out of this career. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, have a great night, you guys, and I will keep this up so you can watch it back. And hopefully, I also chose the option where all of your comments stay. So, thank you for all the really thoughtful comments. And if you have anything you want to add, do not hesitate to leave a comment for us. Both Dave and I will be checking back on this and trying our best to answer all of your questions. And I will just keep you updated on everything that we learn. And if I make it to the EV training, I will definitely do my best to document it for you guys and share my experience afterwards. So thank you everyone so much for being here. Enjoy the rest of your Friday night and your weekend. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks
Thanks,
all. Take
everybody.
care. Bye bye.
Bye.